Ghana is an oil exporter, and at one point it turned to the IMF to help it stabilize its currency. We are moving towards that direction. How can such a phenomenon be stemmed in our case and avert any risks that could come from the oil economy?
You know, the discovery and exploitation of oil can be a curse on an economy. So what we have observed and what we recommend is that institutions be solid and that governance rules be well established. To help that process, transparency, the right accounting, reporting of exploitation, licenses, license fees, royalties, payments is needed. How much has to go to the budget, how much has to go to the future generation funds is something that a country needs to decide for itself. But what we know has worked in the past is when there was an allocation between what is used for short-term investment purposes and what is used for future purposes, because it's a captive rent. It's a natural treasure, and there is no reason ever to waste it for one single generation and to forget about the future, because it will not last forever.
Okay. Does it present some kind of challenge actually for macroeconomics?
It's always a challenge when an economy which is going through development, making progress, making sacrifices, making step-by-step improvement, suddenly is blessed by a natural resource that is discovered and which brings about a lot of revenue. Temptation is huge to just sort of sit back, let the money come in and not think about the future. Our recommendation is transparency, accountability, allocation of the revenue to the present for investment purposes preferably, and for the future for future generations. We
know that China may decide to move towards services, and that may generate some issues, if you like, because there have been a big market for commodities from countries like ours.
Right.
How would you recommend countries like ours respond if such a thing happens?
It's inevitable that a large emerging country such as China gradually moves from being industry heavy to being more service oriented, from being export driven to being more domestically focused, to being investment determined, or from being investment determined to being more consumption determined. So those evolutions will take place, and as a result, when you develop services, when you have pretty much covered your industrial needs and decided to resort to domestic market and consumption more than exports, you're going to consume less raw materials or different raw materials, and the supply chain is going to have to adjust, which means that the best recipe for countries that have relied heavily on exports to China is to set back, revisit the business model, and look at diversifying the economy. That's the wise move.
Okay.
I mean, China is still growing at 6.6% at the moment, so it's not as if it had settled down to stability, stagnation, and low growth. It is still quite a growth from the basis at which it has grown. But it is a different model going forward that we will be seeing.
In a world where we have Brexit, and we have nations like ours, small nations, and then we have the US could change its policy. So we have the combination of those two issues in the picture. How should we respond?
I think a country like Uganda has huge resources and can really try to leverage those resources with the right policies, with the right and judicious and efficient use of scarce resources. There are many ways to deal with it, and we can discuss that if you will. I think it could also very well look into the regional market and see what opportunities there are in countries that surround it that can be great opportunities and good partners to trade with. I would observe also that the trading relationship between a country like the UK and Uganda is not decisive. It's a very small amount of your trade. You have far more trading relationships with the European Union at large.
Yeah.
So, of course, Brexit will lead to changes. We'll have, pluses and minuses. But I don't think that a country like Uganda is going to be directly impacted by less trade with the UK, for instance, if that was to happen.
Okay. Countries like Uganda have moved away from getting funds from IMF. We're under the PSI, the Policy Support Instrument. Still, being under the regime of PSI generates some challenges. What has IMF found out that countries under PSI and non-funding could experience in terms of challenges?
I see the policy support instrument as a safeguard, as a guide, as monitoring support that is actually asked by the countries.
Yeah.
It's not me who decides to go and do some PSI with Uganda. The Ugandan authorities find it helpful because it's an indication in the dialogue that we have together that the economy is growing strongly, that the policies are good, and that there are no financing needs for it to grow. So I would say it's a net positive to operate under PSI, and it's something that is known the world over.
As smooth? Is it smooth?
The PSI?
Yeah. For instance, IMF and Uganda operating the PSI, I know that.
It's a very good relationship.
Yeah.
It's a very friendly and productive and positive relationship. Yeah, and it has been for many years.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.